Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this, the third of a 7-part series titled Wasted, Small Efforts for Big Change. The program is planned around a series of conversations about waste, environmental justice, and the role that we all play in the future of sustainability. I'm Tony Marino, Executive Director of the Rockwell Foundation. Founded in 1935, our mission is to promote and support environmental education and conservation in the lower Connecticut River Valley. Please go to rockwellfoundation.org to find out more. Rockwell has been pleased to collaborate with the following co-sponsors: City of Middletown, the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments, better known as RiverCOG, and Wesleyan University Sustainability Office. This program could not have happened without the assistance of many individuals, in particular, Cheryl Baldwin, Janice Ehlemeyer, Jen Kleindienst, Kim O'Rourke, and members of the Rockwell Program Committee. A special shout out to Liz Brittany, the Communications and Grant Coordinator at Rockwell, as she will be managing the mechanics of today's meeting, and to Michelle Ekman, Program Consultant to the Rockwell Foundation. Thank you to all of them. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the heritage of the Indigenous people of the state of Connecticut. We understand that the issues we discuss throughout this series acknowledge the responsibilities that we hold for the social and environmental justice and the protection of natural resources, protected so that for those on whose land we live, work, and play. The theme for tonight's discussion is, where do we go from here? And just a reminder, enter your questions into the chat. The first Q&A will be at the end of the first presentation. To start today's program, I'd like to welcome Katie Scarf-Dykes, who, as most of you know, is the Commissioner of Connecticut's Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Commissioner Dykes was nominated by Governor Ned Lamont to serve as the Commissioner of DEEP and was confirmed on February 20th, 2019. Katie previously served as Chair of the Connecticut Public Utilities Regulatory Authority from 2015 to 2018, and as Deputy Commissioner for Energy at Connecticut DEEP from 2012 to 2015. Commissioner Dykes has also served as the Chair of the Board of Directors of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI, from 2014 to 2017. RGGI is a multi-state effort focused on reducing carbon emissions from electric generating facilities. Commissioner Dykes joined Connecticut DP in March of 2012 after prior service as Deputy General Counsel for the White House, Council on Environmental Quality, and as legal advisor to the General Counsel for the U.S. Department of Energy. She is a graduate of Yale College and the Yale Law School. Commissioner Dykes, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with everyone tonight, especially on such a gorgeous evening. Let's see, hopefully you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Well, it's great to be with everyone, and thanks so much for having me. I just, a little cautionary note, I have 3 little kids, and I'm solo parenting tonight, so if they may pop in and make a cameo appearance, and we'll roll with it. But it's great to see everybody, and I know folks are juggling a lot at this time during this pandemic. It's very thrilling to be with you and to talk about a really important issue and opportunity that we have to enhance the protection of our environment and advance sustainability in our communities, which is addressing our waste crisis, our waste disposal crisis here in the state of Connecticut. I'm going to try to share my screen here really quickly, and what I want to talk with you about is some work that we've been doing at DEEP over the last 6 months or so, partnering with municipalities all across the state who are such important partners for us in addressing this waste crisis. We have, we launched a program called the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management. It's a mouthful, CCSMM. And as I get started with the presentation, I'm going to post into the chat a link to our website where you can see all kinds of information about this initiative. And I hope that that'll be a great resource for everyone. I believe we have, you're going to be hearing tonight from Mayor Florsheim, who has been a great partner in this effort, as well as First Selectman Laura Francis is, I know, with us tonight from Durham. She is a co-chair of the CCSMM process with us. So we are just really, it's one of the most exciting things that I've done as commissioner at DEEP is to work with towns on this process. But we can only make progress in advancing sustainable materials management solutions if we have citizens engaged all across the state and helping support municipal leaders and those of us working at the state level to make this a top priority and to adopt new types of programs and ways of managing our waste in a way that's more sustainable. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. We'll see how I do. Let's see. You would think at this point in the pandemic, I'd be better at this. Okay. Let's see if you can now see the full slide. Does that work? Great. Okay. All right. So first, let's talk about what is going on with our waste disposal system and where all of our waste goes. So these are some statistics from 2018 that represent all of the tons of waste that's generated all across our state. 64% of the waste that we generate, the material that we generate, is sent for disposal at waste to energy facilities. These are incineration facilities that are located across our state. Some of the two largest facilities are in Bridgeport and another one in Hartford, which is the Mira waste energy facility. And these facilities burn the trash and they produce electricity from incineration of this material. The Connecticut actually built many of these waste energy facilities across the state in the 1980s or so as a way to enable municipalities to close municipal landfills. So folks were really interested in ending landfilling and adopting these technologies of waste energy facilities. And that's enabled us to manage a lot of the disposal of our waste here within our state and be self-sufficient. But many of these waste energy facilities, they do produce greenhouse gases and other air pollutants from combusting this material, and many of them are located in environmental justice communities. We also, 22% of the material that we dispose of is recycled. And so Connecticut is, we've had single stream recycling and a bottle bill program for many years. And we're always focused on improving the quality of our recycled materials and helping educate people on what belongs in the recycling bin and what doesn't. And I want to give a plug for our tool you can find on our website called What's In, What's Out. You can always check there, and it's a great guide to tell you, no matter where you live in Connecticut, what kinds of materials can go into the recycling bin and what needs to go into the trash. But 22% of the material that we are disposing of every year is recycled. 14% in 2018 is exported. And when I talk about exporting, what I'm referring to is material that's being sent out of state, and the vast majority of that material is ultimately buried in landfills that are located in other states. So this is the snapshot of where all of our waste tonnage is currently going. But our challenge that we're facing, number one, is that hang on just a second, that much of the waste energy facilities that we have in the state, here, I'll go to this next slide first, is if you look on the left-hand side of this chart, you can see that where all of the waste that is the material that's being sent for disposal is going. So you see the light pink is material that's being exported, again, to out-of-state landfills. And then below that, you see the different colors. And this corresponds to the volume of material that's being sent to different waste energy facilities around the state. The hot pink there is the Mira waste energy facility located in Hartford. At its peak, it has handled about 1/3 of the municipal solid waste from the state. But that facility is aging. It has its equipment is beyond its useful life. It's in need of upgrades. And ultimately, we've determined that the cost of upgrading this very old facility is not cost effective. And it's expected that that facility is going to close in July of 2022. And there are about 50 towns across the state of Connecticut that have been sending their waste to the Mira waste energy facility for disposal. And then you can see below the Mira facility a number of other facilities located in different parts of the state that are also providing waste energy disposal. So if we do nothing, if we don't really change any of our practices in terms of how we are managing our materials, what's likely to happen when the Mira facility closes in July of 2022? Well, we know that the most likely thing that will happen is that more municipalities will begin to send their waste out of state to landfills. They will opt to export their waste to other states. And this is not ideal from an environmental sustainability standpoint. It's also not ideal from an economic standpoint as well. And that's because, let me shift back here to the last slide, oops, sorry. That's because many of the landfills that are located in closer proximity to Connecticut are slated to close over the next couple of years. We're going to see a 40% drop in the landfill capacity that's available by 2026. And so that means that, again, if we don't make any positive change around managing our waste more sustainably, that we are going to be relying on sending our waste on trucks or on trains far distances to the Midwest to states that will accept it. So that's not good from the environment, from sustainability standpoint or from an economic standpoint, and it puts Connecticut at the mercy of other states and other communities to accept our waste. So this is the challenge that we're facing. As the waste energy facilities close like Mira, and as we have to ship waste farther and farther distances, the cost of disposal of waste is going up. And so that is putting a pinch on municipal budgets as well, which means that fewer dollars are available for other types of programs and services that citizens are relying on their municipalities to provide. So these are some of the different reasons why we've been so focused on our waste crisis and working together with municipalities to solve it. Now, if you look back at this chart, you see the bars that are on the right-hand side. So in order to figure out the solutions that can be available to us to solve this crisis, it's important to look inside the trash bin and figure out what exactly is it that we're sending for disposal. So what you see on the right-hand side is a breakdown of what we're throwing away. Now, this is not what we're recycling. If you take the recycling out, this is all the material that we're sending for disposal. Well, right away, you can see that about 30% of what we're sending to landfills or to waste energy facilities are food scraps and yard waste and other organic materials, which can be composted or processed in an anaerobic digester or other types of facilities to produce compost and other renewable gases and other types of important soil amendments and positive products. Another 40% of what we're sending for disposal every year are materials that can be recycled. So that includes paper. Anyone who's been participating in e-commerce online and gotten those deliveries of boxes to your door, we've seen a really significant uptick in the quantity of packaging that's going into the trash bin. Plastic, metal, glass, these are other recyclable materials that are showing up in significant volumes in our disposal stream, even though we have our recycling programs in place. So when you look at all of that opportunity, it tells you that 70% of what we are throwing away every year, if we could manage it more sustainably, we would not have to send it to a waste energy facility or to a landfill. So this gives me a lot of optimism that we can find solutions to our waste disposal crisis that are both good for the environment and cost effective and good for municipal budgets. So that led us to work on the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management. So we put out an invitation last August, to every town in Connecticut to join with us at DEEP in evaluating programs and new strategies that we could implement to achieve sustainable materials management. And so you can see on this map, all of the purple shaded towns are towns that have joined into this process. We had large cities, we had small towns, we had suburban communities, we had Republican-led and Democratic-led towns, joining into this initiative. It's been incredibly diverse. And you can go and check on our website to see if your town is participating in the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management. I'll note that we have, since we started this process, we've now got about 85 towns that are participating in CCSMM. And if one of your towns is participating, you should let your mayor or first selectman know that you're interested in helping and supporting this effort. And if they're not participating, we're always getting new members who are joining. But it's an important way for us to support municipalities and work together on sustainable materials management. I'm just going to go really quickly. This is some of the things that we committed to do together, or sharing experiences and lessons learned, and importantly, evaluate a menu of options. We wanted to collect all the best practices, talk to every town and find out what they're doing and what's working. And so we held lots of different workshops and Zoom seminars to hear from folks who are trying innovative new things from all across the country and right here in Connecticut. And then we compiled all of those different strategies into a menu of options. So it's about 50 pages long. It's located on our website, and it's really exciting. When we put this all together, we found that there are hundreds of different solutions that municipalities could implement. The good news is that there's something that each community is different and will have different priorities, but there's something that every community can do. And in aggregate, if every community is doing different things, doing something, it will help to, again, minimize the amount of waste that we have to send for disposal at landfills or at waste energy facilities. So I'm going to go quickly through a couple of the different solutions that we identified in this process. The first is extended producer responsibility. So you may ask, what is extended producer responsibility, or EPR? Essentially, it is, this is a program that says, under our current waste system, municipalities have to pay for all the costs of managing the disposal of products. But what would happen if we made the manufacturers of those products take responsibility to pay for the costs of managing the disposal of their products? Well, certainly that would mean that the manufacturers would start designing products that can be more easily recycled or that generate less waste for disposal. And so an extended producer responsibility program does exactly that. We have extended producer responsibility programs in place in Connecticut already for electronic waste, for example, for paint and other types of materials that you may be familiar with. This year, we have identified through the CCSMM a priority to encourage the legislature to adopt or mandate an extended producer responsibility programs for a couple of different materials that are really hard to manage in our waste stream. The first one is for gas cylinders. So if anyone is cleaning up their grill and getting ready for the summer season, you're familiar with those little propane tanks. They can be really dangerous if they go into the waste stream and costly to manage. And so we are excited that the General Assembly is considering a bill that would require extended producer responsibility for gas cylinders. Similarly for tires. Tires are frequently subject to illegal dumping. They enter into our watersheds and damage natural environments. And so we're excited about the possibility of adopting extended producer responsibility for tires as well. Another big opportunity we identified for extended producer responsibility is packaging. So thinking about all those Amazon boxes and what a difference it would make if some of those e-commerce companies had to take on the costs of disposal of their packaging as opposed to making municipal taxpayers pay for it. This is the theme behind developing packaging EPR. It would be a game changer when you think about that volume of paper that's in our waste stream. But it's something that, this is a program that would take some time to develop, and we're working with other states to develop a kind of a model program that we could possibly bring to the legislature next year. Another major area of focus for our program, or our CCSMM process, was food scraps and organics. This is the one that so many municipal leaders were really excited about. I think there's a lot of momentum here around food scraps and organics. We identified a couple of, basically a roadmap for how to expand affordable organics diversion in our state. So we've hosted a kickoff meeting, a conference to talk about best practices, bring together developers of infrastructure like anaerobic digesters and commercial composting facilities. There's a big chicken and egg problem here, which is that we need to have facilities that can manage these organics, these organic materials, and we need to make sure that they're located really close to communities, because it's much cheaper to send waste to an anaerobic digester, organic material, than it is to send it to an incinerator. But the problem is how far do you have to drive and to truck that material to an anaerobic digester. We currently have one commercial anaerobic digester here in the state in Southington, Connecticut. What we really need is to build infrastructure to make it make those transportation costs as low as possible, and that's the key to getting organics and food scrap collection programs established across the state. But there's a lot of interest among municipal leaders in addressing food scraps and organics, and a lot of different ways to do that. These are, again, we surveyed towns who are in the CCFM process about their willingness to site or host this kind of infrastructure, and we heard a lot of great responses. This includes simple things like promoting community composting and adding food scraps to leaf composting that may be available at transfer stations. But one thing for everybody to be aware of, you can help address our waste crisis by having a compost pile at home in your backyard if you have that available to you. And there's a lot of great educational materials on our website about how to do that. And then another thing that we are excited about is the possibility for the legislature to strengthen a requirement for commercial generators. These are food manufacturers, supermarkets, resorts that generate a lot of food waste. We have a current requirement for those folks to send any organic material to an anaerobic digester or other compost facility if there's one located within 20 miles of them. That's a really, really important part of the chicken and egg problem, because in order to get investors to develop new anaerobic digesters or compost facilities, they need to know that the food scraps are going to be there for them to process. And so having this commercial generator law strengthened will go a long way to do that. I also want to note that we heard from a lot of municipalities participating in the program that they'd be interested in developing residential food scrap collection programs. And this is a great place to get citizens involved in helping support the rollout of these programs, including as well as promoting home composting or establishing a drop-off location for people to bring food scraps to a transfer station, for example. Okay, another really important category of action that we talked about in CCSMM is unit-based pricing. I don't know how many people are familiar with unit-based pricing, or it's sometimes called pay-as-you-throw. It is a practice, it's an approach to addressing materials management that is far and above any other solution. It's one of the most impactful ways to reduce the amount of waste that's sent to disposal and encourage recycling. And at its simplest, what a unit-based pricing program does is it basically sets a price, has citizens pay based on the volume of trash that they're generating. So there's only 2 communities in Connecticut that currently have implemented unit-based pricing. Stonington is one of them, and they generate roughly half of the annual tonnage of waste that's sent to disposal by comparison to other municipalities in Connecticut. It's really significant. And they do this by simply mandating that any residents have to purchase trash bags and only dispose of their trash in those certain trash bags that they paid for. And so instead of treating trash disposal like an all-you-can-eat buffet, it basically sends a signal and reminds people that they should try to minimize or manage their waste sustainably. And so what happens in communities that have adopted unit-based pricing is that then people think before they throw, and we see that people recycle more, they recycle better, People also participate in food scrap collection programs and things where those are available. But for communities that have implemented unit-based pricing, they tell us that they have the amount of waste that's set for disposal drops by about 40% immediately when the program is implemented, and it stays that way permanently. So this is a major, major program and a way to help advance sustainable materials management. We know that there's a lot of opportunity to do this here in Connecticut, and there are many municipalities that have set down the path to propose adoption of pay-as-you-throw, but it's also a program that, you know, has generated a lot of questions and concern, and, you know, a lot of dialogue and discussion. It can become a real hot button issue in communities as folks, citizens are asking questions about why they have to now pay for something that they didn't pay for before. So it's something that we think has to be on the table. It has to be one of the tools that we look at, but we're really interested and have been refining different approaches for unit-based pricing to help make it more something that is more acceptable and can get more champions behind it across our state and various municipalities. I'm going to go very quickly here to recycling. That's the fourth category that we looked at in this ECS-MEM program. We have great recycling programs across the state, but we can always do more. And so there's a couple of, actually a large number of suggestions that we put into that menu of options and that we highlighted through this process that would improve our recycling programs. And many of them are listed here. I will note the ones that are colored in blue are ones that would require legislation to implement. So for folks, I won't talk about all of these, but I will say that one really impactful way for us to improve recycling in the state is by modernizing the bottle bill. And there is a legislative proposal this year that would strengthen and expand the bottle bill to more types of containers and increase the deposit value for containers that are covered in the bottle bill. It's one of the most powerful ways for us to recycle containers in the state. And so that's one that folks should definitely keep on their radar as a positive way to enhance recycling. I think that that's where I will close. I think that, you know, hopefully this has given you a sense of some of the different initiatives that we and recommendations that we've advanced. It's obviously what's happening in the legislative session this year will make a big difference in expanding sustainable materials management in the state. But it's something where, you know, municipal leaders have shown that they're really interested in getting involved and showing leadership and trying new programs and new approaches. And it's a place where they really need support from citizens, from people to get engaged. If you have a sustainability committee in your town, or working with Sustainable CT, which has been a great partner, or just reaching out directly to recycling coordinators or municipal leaders who may be active in your community, and letting them know that this is something that, you know, is important to you. There's lots of different ways for folks to get engaged, and you know, it's something that when you wheel your trash bin out to the curb or your recycling bin, you know, every week, you may not know what's going on. For the average person, a lot of this crisis and what's happening is really invisible to you. And so that's why it's so great to be part of this event this evening and talk about what's going on, because every single citizen in the state can make a major difference and really support huge improvements to our waste system by getting involved and being supporters of these different efforts. And I think lastly, you know, it's important to note that by getting involved and by advocating for more sustainable materials management strategies in our state, it's also a concrete way for you to support environmental justice in our state, because so much of the waste disposal infrastructure, both here in Connecticut and across the country, whether we're talking about landfills or waste energy facilities, is frequently located in communities of color, communities that are disproportionately impacted by environmental harms. And so these choices that we make about recycling better, checking that what's in, what's out tool, or starting a compost pile, or getting involved with your school to support composting, recycling education at schools. There's so many things that individuals can do, and your involvement is critical for us to be able to move these things forward. So thank you so much for the time tonight, and look forward to be part of the event.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We are going to do a question and answer period right now. And I'm going to turn it over to Jen Kleindienst, who's going to manage the chat. Jen?
All right, we have a few questions already in the chat, Commissioner Dykes. The first is from Zach Plord, wanting to know regarding waste to energy plants, if they generate enough electricity to balance the greenhouse gas emissions and other negative externalities that they create.
That's a great question. So waste energy facilities, the greenhouse gas emissions that they are responsible for is directly related to their combustion of the trash, of the waste. And so basically they burn the waste, and then by burning the waste, they heat up water tanks and create steam, and then that turns turbines and creates the electricity. So the byproducts of the waste energy facilities are both greenhouse gas emissions from the incineration of the waste and electricity.
Thank you. Jen Huddleston notes that she's heard that many recyclable materials that make it into the recycling are not actually being recycled, but are shipped out of state and stored. And she wants to know how we're doing with actually reusing that material.
Right. Thank you for asking that question. There are a lot of misperceptions out there that people have that waste or that a material that's being sent, that's being recycled is actually getting burned or landfilled or not actually getting recycled. That's not true. But one of the things that it's important for people to keep in mind is that the ability for the material to be recycled and turned into higher value products is directly related to how well we do in putting the right thing in the recycle bin. So I have to admit, I don't know if folks have heard of like wish cycling before, but I am totally guilty as charged. Until I, really got involved here at Deep, I was one of those people who really felt guilty throwing things away. So I was always like, let me just err on the side of caution and put it in the recycle bin because maybe it's recyclable. There are not like little elves that are sorting everything out for us and fixing our mistakes when we recycle. When we put the wrong thing in the recycle bin, it can contaminate the recycling and the recycled material and mean that the end uses for that material are not as valuable. So that's why I love to promote the What's In, What's Out tool. I'll put it up on the chat here so that you can go and take a look. And the better we are at knowing what goes in and what goes out, the better the value is and the quality of the recycled materials that we can make out of our recycling. So that's a great question.
Thank you. Liz Holder asked whether Middletown would have sufficient organics to support an anaerobic digester. So my question to add on to that is the idea that the anaerobic digesters that might be sited around the state would be regional, or would they be for that municipality?
Great question. You have a fabulous mayor, Mayor Florsheim, who's with us tonight. Also, Kim O'Rourke, who's a terrific recycling coordinator in Middletown. And I know Middletown is doing some really innovative things in terms of developing more food scrap diversion programs for restaurants and I believe for residents as well in Middletown. So that's really exciting. There are anaerobic digesters of all different sizes. I mentioned the commercial digesters. There are also on-farm anaerobic digesters being built around the state. Right now, the commercial digester in Southington called Quantum Biopower, it's actually not full to capacity. So one of our first steps is supporting municipalities that are developing diversion programs like Middletown is doing to be able to get that waste to the quantum to the digester in Southington. Another big question is, do we need to build more digesters all around the state? Or one idea that has emerged is building collection facilities at various transfer stations around the state. So we built out the sort of satellite collection locations that are in close proximity to different towns. Then the food scraps could be collected there and then brought to a central location where a large digester might be located. So there's a lot of different ways to address this, but we're excited about what Middletown's doing on food scraps.
Thank you. John Hall asks if unit-based pricing tends to increase illegal dumping.
Another great question. We get this question a lot. No, unit-based pricing does not contribute to an increase in illegal dumping. There are a lot of myths that kind of float around unit-based pricing programs, and this is one of them. What we've heard from municipalities that have implemented unit-based pricing is that if you had an illegal dumping problem before you implemented it, you may still have one. And if you didn't have an illegal dumping problem before, you're not going to get have that become a problem because of unit-based pricing. So they're really very different. And I think one of the things that we can really help with illegal dumping is putting in extended producer responsibility programs like the EPR program for tires, or we have mattress program that was implemented a number of years ago. So those we find are the best ways to address bulky waste illegal dumping in the state.
Great. Another unit-based pricing question is about municipalities that include waste and recycling programs as part of property tax bills, and what sort of education the state might provide as cities and towns adopt unit-based pricing so that there's not confusion.
Yes, this is one that we've talked about in our unit-based pricing working group is even being able to itemize on your property tax bill how much of your property taxes relate to the costs of waste management is just one step towards giving people more transparency and better understanding about what the cost of waste disposal and waste management is. I mean, for towns that are part of that send their waste to MIRA, they've seen a really significant increase in the cost of waste disposal. The MIRA facility has had to increase their fees per ton from about $60 some about 4 or 5 years ago to now over $100 per ton. So, and that's not just exclusive to the MIRA towns. We've also seen other waste energy facilities have increasing their tip fees as well. So your towns are paying more for disposal costs, and it's important to give information to citizens about those costs, because every dollar that they're spending, if you talk to the town of Stonington, they've saved, I believe, $7 million over on the last several years that they've been able to invest in other types of things. Imagine what you would do if you had $7 million in your town. What would you rather spend your money on? I'd rather spend it on things that improve education programs for my kids, for example, as opposed to paying for trash disposal. But people don't necessarily know that that's a choice. And so helping to get citizens more information about what's at stake and what the cost of not adopting unit-based pricing is can really help.
Great. I have a $10 million question for you, which is how clean does a jar, bottle, or plastic container have to be so that it doesn't contaminate the batch?
Well, we have this debate every night in my house. So, I think one thing that we do, and I'm not sure if this is best practice. So Sherill, Baldwin, if you're on, you should tell us in the chat what's the best thing to do. But, that peanut butter jar that's really hard to get clean, we just put it in the dishwasher with the rest of our dishes. And then put the jar in the recycle bin. So that's something that I can say, just not, I won't say that's the official advice from DEEP, but personally, I found that to be really effective.
Thank you. And then so far, last question, unless anyone else has time for one or two more, perhaps. Has the What's In, What's Out initiative actually improved the quality of recyclables that we've seen?
Well, I don't know if we've done a formal study to confirm the impact, but I think we've heard, from folks that it's been incredibly helpful. One of the things that we did in order to build this tool is we worked with recyclers across the state to standardize the types of containers that can go into the single stream. That's actually something you might take for granted, but in a lot of states, there are different standards, different rules about what can go in and out, town by town or county by county. And so having that kind of standardized definition across the state helps us to make it easier to educate people, no matter where you are. If you're in, Ledyard or in New Haven, it's the same. So I think it's been a really impactful tool just for that reason. And
in my work at Wesleyan, I can definitely say that has been true, explaining to employees, this is true here and also when you go home. some people still don't believe me.
Yes, yeah. So it's a great tool, and I'm posting in the chat where you can access that tool. So we're really proud of it and love to share and get the word out. You can quiz your, friends and neighbors, about how good they are, how expert they are at recycling with this tool. That's always a fun party game. So.
All right, any final questions for Commissioner Dykes before we wrap up the Q&A?
Jen, I think I did see one more that's the very top of the list. It's do the waste to energy plants generate enough electricity to offset?
Yep, we asked that one.
We did. Okay, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Must have been.
All right, any final burning questions?
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Commissioner. We
Thank
had two
you.
opportunities to meet and chat. We had a meeting prepared for this one with both with the mayor and with Lisa, and you guys were so cooperative and so nice and so welcoming to our need to get this organized. And so thank you so much for participating tonight. You've been terrific, and certainly stay if you can. I know you have children probably knocking on the door, but stay for as long as you can. And thank you again so much.
Oh, thank you. And I should say a final word, letting your municipal leaders know about your interest in these issues and letting your legislators know, because there are so many important bills that are before the General Assembly right now. There's about 2 months left in the session. And so letting folks know that you're interested in these issues is really, really important. And finally, we're always excited to talk to folks to get the word out about what we're doing on sustainable materials management. So happy to join future meetings, or folks have questions, you can just email at katie.dykes@ct.gov. So thanks so much for the time, and I'll stick around and look forward to the rest of the program.
You can open the door and let the kids in. That'll be fine. Again, thank you again, Commissioner. Our next presenter is Ben Florsheim. Mayor Ben is the 62nd mayor of the city of Middletown, having been elected in November of 2019 as the youngest mayor in the city history. Since taking office, Ben has been focused on investing in our local economy, working to make Middletown a more sustainable city, keeping the cost of living in check, and ensuring a robust and equitable community-wide response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Son of educators, Ben was born in Chicago and grew up around the U.S. before arriving in Middletown as a student at Wesleyan University. And he decided to settle permanently in the community he had come to love. Before running for mayor, Mayor Ben worked for a nexus of local, state, and federal government, including as an aide to U.S. Senator Christopher Murphy. Ben lives in the Moromis section of Middletown with his fiancee and their rescue cat. Mayor Ben, you have the floor.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for that introduction. I'm about a year and a half into this job, and I'm still very much getting used to having a biography read about me. But thank you for having me, and Commissioner, thank you for your good work and your kind words. And we're really pleased to be able to be working with you and your agency and with Rockfall and many of the folks represented here. I've been going through the attendees, and Laura Francis, my colleague from Durham, who we were co-chairs of the Increasing Recycling Group for CCSMM, our own recycling coordinator, Kim O'Rourke, who really wrote much of the presentation that I'm about to give. I just arranged it into slides, and we're going to talk about the importance of that role in our presentation tonight. But very happy to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity, and I'm excited to talk about this tonight. So Liz, I think, has the presentation, so if we can pull that up. It's also been a while since I've done a PowerPoint presentation, so I will do my best here. Great. So, the topic at hand is where do we go from here? And I wanted to try to address that question head on as best I could. And a lot of this is going to focus on what I want to share is what Middletown has done with respect to waste management. How do we try to be innovative? How do we try to be collaborative with our residents, with town agencies on waste production and waste management, and a lot of this is going to focus on recycling because that was the group that I was working on at the increased recycling group. That is a big focus of what we have put our time and our energy and our money into in the city of Middletown. So we can go to the next slide. We'll sort of try to cover 3 essential topics, and they'll be kind of woven together. So you can, if you click the next couple bullets will come up. They'll be kind of woven together and won't be sort of 3 separate sections, but really Middletown's approach to waste reduction, what we have learned, and what is working here in the city, and what we think can work in other municipalities and around the state. Some of the takeaways from the process that we went through in the increased recycling work group, and really what needs to happen next. Where do we go from here, and how you can be involved, your organization can be involved, your municipality can be involved in that effort. Next slide, please. So just a couple of demographic facts about Middletown, and I illustrate these just for 2 reasons. One, to say Middletown really is sort of a microcosm of Connecticut in a lot of ways. We are a city of about 50,000 people right in the center of the state, and that we are not particularly, we are a special community in many ways, but in terms of our demographics, in terms of our population, in terms of our revenues and that sort of thing, there isn't anything particularly special or unique about Middletown. And I say that to say, I think there is an assumption out there that investing in some of these policies at the local level is something that can only happen in the wealthiest communities in the state and in the country, that have a lot of disposable income, a lot of money to burn, and the ability to spend that money on initiatives that help the environment and that help us with these goals. And I think Middletown is a case in point that is not true. We are a town that is representative of the state's demographics and income, and many of our sort of and many of the lifestyle patterns as well. And so if it can happen in Middletown, it can certainly happen anywhere in the state. So we can go to the next slide. Couple more a little bit. So the key question, how can cities increase recycling among their residents? That was the question we tackled at CCSMM's working group. That is the question that our recycling office deals with every day. And I will start by giving you the most important thing that I think can happen at the local level. It is the simplest and most straightforward. It is also one of the most challenging to put into practice, but it's something that I think advocacy around this is warranted at the local level. And if you're trying to make a difference in your city or your town, you want something to organize around and advocate for, this would be at the top of my list. And you can go to the next slide, and that is staff. We can go to the next slide. Middletown invested in a full-time recycling coordinator starting in 1998, and we have kept that position funded all the way up until now. And like I said, Kim O'Rourke, many of you know her. You can put the rest of the bullets on the screen. Kim O'Rourke, many of you know her. She does outstanding work in the city and around the state. And the key here is really that a full-time staff person is what it takes to take the ideas that we're talking about from theory to reality. Volunteer-driven efforts are great, and we want to support those, but a staff position helps to uplift and organize those volunteer efforts. It takes a full-time staff person to take things from concept to completion, to start projects and see them through. It's relatively rare in Connecticut, and Middletown is the exception to the rule here, and we shouldn't be the exception. And one of the big things that we talked about at CCSMM was the importance of the recycling coordinator role, to really see through some of the topics that we're going to talk through in our different communities, and to work with the volunteers to make sure that the work is happening, is being channeled in the right direction. And it's a worthwhile investment. You can make that case to your Board of Finance or to your City Council, that it is something that is going to both help us address this crisis that we're facing at a statewide level, but is also going to bring in grants and opportunities and revenue into the city that is going to save taxpayers money, not necessarily on their tax bill, but on their waste bill. If a city can get a better hold on how waste management or improper waste management is adding to their budgetary constraints. So next slide. Events are great, and the fact that you have a full-time recycling coordinator makes events really not easy to do, but makes them doable. It means that you can have a robust calendar of things, and you can have a presence. More importantly, you can have a presence at existing events in the community. And so I'll give a couple of examples of some of the things that we've worked on. So you can go to the next slide. This is some of our recycling commission and our recycling coordinator, but I'll talk about a few of the events that we run in the city of Middletown out of the recycling office. Paper shredding. We do a Middletown event every year in April, and then there are regional events around the state that residents can attend. We usually get about 150 people at that annual event in Middletown and recycle almost 3 tons of material at those events. Composting workshops, we hold not just workshops, but we also sell composting bins to residents. And so again, we host those at different locations around the community, and I'll talk about some of those in a few minutes. But composting workshops have been a popular thing in our community. Household hazardous waste events, again, this is something that is done on a regional basis. It happens in Middletown and it happens in other towns around the region. And the photo that you see here is a team of folks going out to help out with hazardous waste collection for households. Food waste collection, really important. You heard a little bit about what Middletown is going to be tackling from Commissioner Dykes. We are hoping to expand our food waste collection infrastructure in our downtown by partnering with a nonprofit agency within our sanitation district, which serves the Main Street and downtown area. So food waste pickup is going to be available for our restaurants downtown and for a portion of our residents starting in the spring of this year. And we're really excited about that. But we also try to create opportunities for food waste disposal. We're working with DEEP to get permits for additional food waste disposal locations. And again, bringing them to where people are, which we'll talk about more throughout, is really key. E-waste collection, electronic devices that can't be thrown away safely and can only be recycled by a specialized facility. We do collection of that at City Hall and at other locations to, again, make it as easy as possible for people when they have these materials, they know where to go to drop them off. Repair cafes are something that we love doing in partnership with the Rockwell Foundation. This is an event where people can bring their broken electronic devices or appliances or other implements. It doesn't have to be electronically powered. I've seen knife sharpening. I've seen all sorts of repairs and improvements being done. And the idea for these is to get people to reuse as much as possible before they have to even recycle or dispose of something, to keep things out of the waste stream as much as possible. And part of that means maintaining your stuff and trying to get as much use and usable life out of it as you can. We know that that's not always everybody's forte. It's not everybody's skill set. It certainly is not mine when it comes to most things, but the repair cafes offer an opportunity for people to come and get those things repaired. And then just general recycling education in a lot of different ways, just trying to be present in the community as much as possible. And we can go to the next slide. So this is a photo from one of our repair cafes of somebody working on repairing a music case. And I think that this is at the Coven House at the Rockwell Foundation's building. And then the next slide is a picture of one of those shredding clinics and a truck there to carry off the recycled shredded goods. Next slide. So online resources are really important, obviously, in 2021 and in the COVID era. We do have a specific, we have multiple Facebook pages and social media pages for different departments citywide. We do have a dedicated one for recycling and public works, so you can follow that on Facebook, and many people do, and that's how many people find out about some of the events that we're hosting. But we can go to the next slide, and I want to show, this is a screen grab from our city website, and I know that it is too small, mostly for people to probably read, but I zoomed out because I wanted to capture the sort of sheer amount of information that we have on our recycling page on our city website. You see there's a list of links that you can sort of see in the center. That is links to episodes of our video series called It's a Walk in the Park, highlighting some of our local parks and how we keep them clean and we keep them sustainable. Along the side, you see a ton of local services that we offer that are related to waste management and are related to recycling management, including bulky waste collection, electronics recycling, that sort of thing. Also links to outside resources like Sustainable CT and DEEP and Recycle CT that can point people in the right direction for questions that they might have. So consolidating that information in one place for residents is a relatively simple thing to do in collaboration with your city government, and can go a really long way towards reducing the barriers that people have towards recycling things that are particularly outside of the usual waste stream. Next slide. So education and outreach is another big thing that the recycling office does. And we have a few different strategies and approaches that we try to take to this. So we can go to the next slide. This is a photo of our booth at the Middletown Farmers Market on the South Green. So we find that, and this is something that Kim and I have talked a little bit about, when she was first serving as a recycling coordinator, would try to plan lots of events and invite people to come and hope that they would show up, and sort of realized over time that there's certainly a role for that and certainly a place for that. But it can be much more effective to try to kind of insinuate yourself into other people's events, to try to find the captive audiences where they are, to establish partnerships, working relationships with the organizing entities, and work together to just have a presence where people are. So we can go to the next slide. This is another tabling set up at Stop and Shop during a food drive, and you can see the little sandwich board sign has a bunch of taped pieces of paper on there that hopefully will catch people's eye, and they'll see, oh, I didn't know the city of Middletown did waste pickup, or that snow plowing was available, and try to entice people as they're walking in and out to come and get more information about a department that oftentimes people don't know that it exists, and then as soon as they know that it exists, they become very engaged with it because there's so many usable services that it offers. Next slide. This is a design for a container label that the city worked on in partnership with Middlesex Community College, Wesleyan, and Middlesex Hospital. You can see there's a pretty good amount of information that they were able to get in here. I think that the really key items on there are advising people, if they're not sure, to put it in the trash, and to make sure to empty or wipe out containers, which is, as we heard from Commissioner Dykes earlier, is a big issue that we are dealing with in the state. Next slide. This is a felt board. It is from one of Kim's programs that she does at elementary schools. And so a good working relationship with Middletown Public Schools is a really key element of our strategy here and of our success here. It's getting the kids engaged with these issues so that they go home and talk to their parents about recycling, about waste management, and that they then reach out to the recycling office to find out what they can be doing more at home. So next slide. This is an oops tag. This is something that is given out for sanitation district residents. So like I said earlier, Middletown does have a sanitation district. We do have waste and trash pickup that is provided by the city, but not for the entirety of the city. It's for sort of a concentrated, dense geographic area near the downtown. And so there are private waste providers that also operate in Middletown. But for folks who live in the sanitation district, and if there are issues that they are having with recycling or improper recycling, items that shouldn't be recycled in the recycling bin, they'll get an oops tag on their bin after it's collected. That's not going to happen every time, but we work to make sure that those get inspected on sort of a regular basis. Education is also about enforcement. Enforcement is best when it is paired with education. So there's no penalty associated with this. It's just a reminder and a piece of information for people to know how they can, in the future, sort of separate their waste better and try to make it easier on the city, make it easier on our waste stream. Next slide. So just to sort of recap, we can put those bullets on the screen. The best way to be effective is not to expect people to come to you to hear about the topic that you care about. It's to meet them where they are at something that they care about and try to address it in a way that makes a difference in their life. And so we have had success running events and doing outreach programs at a wide variety of different facilities. Schools, I mentioned, working with churches is a great opportunity, doing events at a senior or a community center, being present for fairs and outdoor events like the farmers market that I showed you, sporting events, trying to get in for presentations at local businesses, maybe with large employers in the area, same with multifamily housing complexes and apartment buildings. And then, of course, doing whatever you can to engage through social media, traditional media, newspapers, television, signage, advertising events. These are all strategies that we try to use where it makes sense to use them. Next slide, please. Community resources. We try to find creative things to offer to the community that other towns maybe don't have, or maybe that other towns have shown us is a best practice that we need to have in Middletown. Again, to make recycling as easy and as straightforward as possible. And again, I will refer back again to the Increasing Recycling Working Group. A through line for every meeting that we had, almost every meeting, was that the biggest obstacle to overcome for many consumers to recycling is just convenience. Is making it convenient for people to do this and to educate them on things that they might not know, like the need to clean out containers. I think that there's been a lot of changes in the conventional wisdom about how recycling works and about how our waste stream works in recent years, and so education is part of it. But lowering the barriers to people being able to actually do the things that we're educating them on is an incredibly important part of the process. So we can go to the next slide. This is our swap shack. It is located at the Middletown Recycling Center and Transfer Station. It is where people can bring and drop off gently used goods that they don't want to throw away as a bulky waste disposal, and that has reusable life. For somebody to take it home and maybe drop off something of their own to be left for the next person. It's super popular. It is unfortunately closed right now, but we're hoping to get it reopened soon, maybe with just a little bit of capacity limitations. But fortunately, we are moving in the right direction, as folks know, on COVID-19. So we're hoping to have that back up and running very soon. And that is fully staffed by volunteers. It's a success story that a lot of other municipalities during increased recycling were interested in trying to pursue themselves. Next slide. Textile recycling. So this is another program that is relatively unique in the state, but can work anywhere. Textile recycling means picking up used clothing, used bedding, towels, and making sure that they get recycled properly. In many cases, clothes that are getting donated and don't get actually sold at the Goodwill wind up in the waste stream, not where they should be. And so and even more so, the sort of disposable, these bins that you see here that are not provided by a reputable recycling provider, those are almost certain to end up in the waste stream. So we offer curbside service, or we did. That is also currently suspended during COVID. But curbside service is a really breakthrough thing, I think, in my opinion, for lowering the barriers to people being able to have their textiles picked up. We also have 11 bin locations at all of our Middletown Public Schools locations, plus our senior center. And we collect about 20 tons per year with this program since we've been doing it, which is good, but could certainly be better as we try to get the word out more about it being available. Next slide, please. Food waste and composting. We have drop-offs for food waste at our recycling center, at our transfer station with the swap shack. We have collection at the farmers market starting this past year. We're going to be continuing that this year. We, like I mentioned, do composting trainings, and we sell bins for people to use at home. And as we talked about earlier, we are going to be starting food waste pickup from our restaurants and our sanitation district residents later this year. And that's a really exciting partnership. I will also add, since we were talking about it earlier, we are very interested in being a host community for an anaerobic digester that would serve the whole region. And our economic development staff has been looking around at potential sites in some of the industrial parts of town that are also right near the highway. So that's a conversation we are very eager to continue with the state and with DEEP because we think that we could be a great partner on hosting an anaerobic digester here in the city of Middletown. Next slide. And again, making it easy, giving people places that they can come that are familiar, where they can drop things off. So the picture here is in City Hall. It's right down the hall from my office. And you can see on the right, that's the compact fluorescent bulb drop off. And then this wooden shelf, each hole is a different item that can be recycled. So plastic film, CDs and DVDs, toothbrushes and toothpaste, that does need to be recycled in a particular way. Office supplies, plastic gift cards, or other cards that don't have the identifying information that don't need to be shredded. We also have drop-offs for batteries and the compact fluorescent light bulbs at Russell Library, and an office supply drop-off at Middletown High School. Next slide. So policy. Policy is something that can be a little bit challenging at the local level, but it's something that at the local level, the best thing that we can do is operate within the limits that are available to us through our legislative councils, through our boards of aldermen, and do the best we can, and then use those successes and use our events and our strategies that we've developed to try to advocate at the state level and at the federal level for additional policy changes. So we can go to the next slide. We've passed several resolutions and ordinances at the local level in the past few years. We had a zero waste resolution back in 2013 that came after we went through a zero waste process. I'm looking for my notes here on that. We were selected back in 2011. This was long before my time in office, but we were selected in 2011 by the EPA Region 1 office to work on a zero waste initiative. And then we were, as a result of that initiative, decided to pass this resolution and have it be adopted by the Common Council. We did pass a plastic bag ban in 2019, bring your own bag resolution. There's a 10-cent fee now for paper bags, and that was rescinded for a little while at the beginning of COVID-19, but as more and more research showed that there was no real concern epidemiologically with reusing bags, we put that back into place, and that is now back in effect for the city of Middletown. And then the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act resolution was something that came directly out of our increased recycling working group process. One of the presentations we had was from staff of U.S. senators and U.S. representatives who have introduced the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act in Congress. This is really an important piece of federal legislation that represents an ambitious place that we need to get to, a significant rethinking of our national economy's relationship with plastic and plastic waste. And we were, I think, the second in the state to adopt a resolution. We learned through the increased recycling working group that it was the town of Mansfield that did this first. we thought it would be a great thing to do in the city of Middletown, and we worked quickly to get that adopted here as well, to show our support for that legislation at the federal level. Next slide. And then when it comes to local government and it comes to government in general, it's always wise to practice what you preach. And so we try to bring these sustainable policies and sustainable practices into our offerings and our day-to-day business. So we switched to recycling school lunch cartons, for example. That's 2,000 cartons per day that are going into the recycling feed instead of into the waste stream. We do recycling enforcement at city buildings and city facilities. So there is a version of that OOPS tag for people who work at City Hall. I have so far not gotten one. I have gotten only rewards for doing the right thing, a reusable straw or something of that nature. But positive reinforcement is an important thing as well. We've replaced styrofoam lunch trays in our school cafeterias with reusable trays. And we have some pilots for doing more composting and starting a garden at City Hall. Your city and town can have all of this and more. But next slide. It is unlikely that you're going to be able to do it as a municipality on your own. Next slide. It's really important that we have partnership from the state and advocacy by the cities and towns at the state level. That's what CCSMM was really all about, was making sure that these municipal voices were being heard at the state level, making sure that municipalities understood the crisis and the perspective of folks at the state, and try to work together on solutions that make sense for everybody. So local action is not enough. We need coordination and funding at the state level. It makes much more sense to try to roll out some of these programs that I've just talked about on a statewide level than to try to have 169 towns all implement them independently. So that is something that I encourage, as Commissioner Dykes did, you to contact your legislators to advocate for some of these programs that we've talked about. Contact them on some of the key issues that are also before the legislature. The bottle bill is really, really important, and expanding the definition of the bottle bill was one of our big goals coming out of the increased recycling working group. Grants at the state level to have recycling coordinators starting out in your community to do more education and outreach, to provide materials. Those are also important areas for you to advocate around at the state level, and to do so. And that doesn't mean don't do it at the local level. You should advocate at your town council. You should advocate with your mayor, your first selectman, on some of the issues that we've talked about here, because they've worked for us at Middletown, and they can work in other towns across Connecticut as well. Next slide. I think that's the last one. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to your questions. Please reach out to Kim or to myself if you'd like to talk further. And we hope that we can be both a model and learn a lot from our peer communities in the future. That has been what's worked for us in the past, is what's going to continue to work for us. And to whatever extent we can elevate that to the state level and really to the national level, that's what it's incumbent upon us to do, to really act locally where we can, and think about how those actions can be replicated, duplicated, expanded at the statewide and national level, so that we can solve this crisis and find ourselves on a path to a better future. So thank you for having me. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And I'm looking forward to the next presentation and to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mayor Ben. You know, Middletown's on a positive trajectory in so many areas, especially in sustainability, and we appreciate your leadership in that effort. So thank you very much. I'd just like to remind everybody that the Q&A for Mayor Ben and with Lisa will take place after the next presentation. It is my pleasure to introduce Lisa Noriega. Lisa is an intern with Sustainable CT and supports their breadth of program areas, including certification, action development, communications, and more, to help advance municipal sustainability in Connecticut. She is currently a graduate student pursuing an MS in environmental policy at Bard College. Lisa is a Southern California native, graduating with her bachelor's degree in environmental science and resource management in 2018 from California State University, Channel Islands. Her professional experience prior to Sustainable CT includes managing energy, waste and recycling, and sustainability at her undergraduate alma mater. Lisa, you have the floor. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks, Liz. All right, can you all hear me okay? Great. So thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here. And thank you especially to the Rockfall Foundation for putting on this amazing and incredibly important and timely webinar series. It's an honor for me to be here and to be speaking alongside Mayor Florsheim and Commissioner Dykes. So let's go ahead and get started. Liz, if you could go to the next slide, thank you. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Sustainable CT by now, but for those of you who aren't, Sustainable CT is a voluntary municipal certification program that certifies Connecticut communities for their sustainability achievements. We are a program created by towns, for towns, in that our program was shaped and continues to be shaped by our participating communities, their interests and their goals for sustainable development. And we have a very broad definition of sustainability, right? So we have 13 action categories that range from well-stewarded land and natural resources to homelessness prevention to materials management. Communities seeking certification choose actions from our menu based on their specific capacities, interests, and goals, and implement them to obtain points towards certification. Sustainable CT is an independently funded grassroots organization, and I just want to take a quick moment to thank our founding funders, without whom our program would not be possible. And they include the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation, the Smart Seed Foundation, and the Common Sense Fund. And it was the Task Force on Sustainability at the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities that shaped the initial vision for the program. So a huge thank you to CCM as well. I also want to quickly thank Commissioner Katie Dykes for serving on our board. And next slide. Yeah, so like I said, we certify communities each year based on their completion of at least one action in each of our categories, an equity toolkit, and at least 200 or 400 points for bronze or silver certification, respectively. So now we have nearly 3/4 of the state participating in Sustainable CT, which is so exciting. And over 1/3 of those communities are certified. And it's even more exciting to look at the distribution of pins on the map as our program continues to grow and represent a diversity of towns in terms of size, political affiliation, geography. And so we're super delighted because this was always the vision that this is what the Sustainable CT program reach would look like. And so to see it actualize this way and watch our program numbers continue to grow is just really amazing. And these 119 registered towns just became 120 today. So here's extending a nice warm welcome to Kent for joining us. Next slide. Yeah, so I want to make it a little interactive. I certainly don't want to bore you just by talking at you this whole time. So I'm curious to see how many of you live in a community or work in a community that participates in Sustainable CT. So in the chat, feel free to say which town you're from and if you're certified, if you're registered, or you can put, I don't know, you can put not yet participating, and that's okay too. So I'll give you a minute to do that, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to move on to the next slide. But if you go to our website's homepage and scroll down to the bottom, you'll be able to see all of our participating communities and find out if yours is on there. Yes, Middletown is silver certified. Wonderful. I'm not surprised by that. And I just want to quickly highlight that our program has changed a whole lot from last year to this year. We created new action categories. We implemented several new actions. We reorganized our entire action roadmap, and we did this to reflect current best practices and to ensure that our program is having the most relevant and meaningful impact possible. So this is what it looked like in 2020. Liz, if you could go to the next slide. And here's what our action roadmap looks like now. So like I said, as you can see, a lot of big changes, a lot of reorganizing, and in a moment, I'll highlight one really exciting and important change that we made this year. Next slide, please. Like I said, in order for communities to obtain certification, they must complete at least one action in each of our categories. And prior to our huge program overhaul and transition this year, that you just saw, all of our waste-related actions were embedded in the category Strategic and Inclusive Public Services, which is on the left. And that contained a hodgepodge of all sorts of actions, as you might remember. So we split up this category into 3 to highlight the importance of addressing issues like materials management, because when our waste-related actions were a part of this larger all-encompassing action category, towns could more easily gloss over these actions, since our requirement is to complete just one action in each category. So some towns would do the sustainability event action to fulfill the requirement and often not employ any of our materials management actions. So having this as its own category now ensures that every town that applies for certification will employ at least one waste management action, since one action in this category is required for certification. So this was kind of our little way of incentivizing materials and waste management and reduction, and nudging towns who may not be doing anything in this area to do something, right? Go ahead to the next slide. So here is what our waste management category currently looks like. We have 4 actions total, and towns can choose which one fits their community's needs, goals, and resources the best. So starting with waste data tracking, then leading into save money and reduce trash or SMART program implementation. Then we encourage towns to recycle additional materials, meaning materials that are not mandated by the state of Connecticut to be recycled. And also we encourage them to compost organics in their communities. And finally, we encourage communities to create a campaign or program aimed at reducing, preventing, and diverting food waste from being created in the first place or entering the landfill. And we've also been following, as Katie Dykes mentioned, and as the mayor mentioned, the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management, or CCSMM, very closely by attending meetings. And we've also been having some really, really fruitful discussions about how CCSMM recommendations might best fit into our action roadmap, and exploring how we might create an action or more in our roadmap in the future that's guided by CCSMM recommendations. We're also working really closely with permitting staff in the recycling office at DEEP to make sure that our efforts are fully aligned, and that we continue to do the work that they're recommending as well. And we're excited to continue working with DEEP to ensure that our program includes best practices for towns to follow. Next slide, please. Right, so Sustainable CT promotes effective waste management, including recycling and composting, through several different modes. The primary way that we do this is through our actions that you just saw. And I want to highlight a couple of towns who've done a really exemplary job, in addition to Middletown, of course, in reducing waste and educating residents in their communities through completing our actions. Mansfield, for example, led workshops for residents about how to compost in their backyards, including what goes in a compost pile. The town has a solid waste advisory committee that meets to discuss all things related to recycling, composting, and waste diversion in their community. They also in 2018 began accepting food scraps from residents from the transfer station leaf pile, which included a food scrap demonstration project. Mansfield's town council in 2019 passed a bring your own bag ordinance, which prohibited businesses from providing plastic checkout bags and included a reusable bag campaign. So now the town offers reusable bags for free to residents, which can be obtained at their public works and engineering office. And finally, the town began the Food Too Good to Waste campaign that provides educational resources to residents to help them reduce and divert waste from the landfill. Next slide, please. So the city of Bristol provides another really great example. Not only do they recycle several non-mandated materials, including books, paints, electronics, and textiles, but they have led recycling workshops, several of them, to help residents understand what can and can't go into the recycling bin. And they did this to fulfill the requirements of Sustainable CT Action 9.3. The city, as a part of their food scraps recovery program, held a home composting workshop at the Bristol Library for residents, which taught them how to easily divert food waste materials from the municipal solid waste stream and also generate compost for home use. And residents that attended even received a small compost receptacle to keep in their kitchens and a home composting book, which I think is really nice. And then a worm composting workshop was held thereafter as a result of the positive feedback from home composting workshop attendees. So these are just a couple of examples. There are so many examples across the state of how communities have really gotten a great start in reducing, managing, and diverting waste in their communities and ensuring longevity in these efforts by educating residents and bringing them into these conversations. Next slide. Yeah, so like I said, Sustainable CT promotes waste reduction and management in several different ways. And one is through our community match fund. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Sustainable CT offers a crowdfunding program to which interested participating communities will apply. And if the project qualifies, they can crowdfund for donations from their community members, and then Sustainable CT will match those donations dollar for dollar. And many of these projects are related to waste reduction and composting efforts. And some examples of this include Stanford's food scrap recycling program, Cheshire's backyard composting project, which aims to reduce curbside trash by 22% through providing education and free bins to residents, and New Canaan's curbside composting program. Next slide. Great. West Hartford also implemented a community match fund project that is going to replace polystyrene foam plates and bowls in their public schools with reusable slotted trays, similar to what Middletown already did, which is huge, and it's really, really exciting. Hopefully more communities will adopt this across the state. The Community Match Fund is also funding materials to build new compost systems in New Haven, and will also help compensate interns there to help manage the bins. And Greenwich, through the Match Fund, also piloted a community food scrap recycling program. And these are just some examples of projects related to waste reduction. There are so many more in the works right now, and so many more to be done, and hopefully in your communities as well. So if your community is already participating in Sustainable CT, I really encourage you to take the steps to start a community match fund project with us. It's really, really easy, and I can help direct you there if needed as well. So I will go to the next slide. Thanks. So I've just talked at you so much, and I'm so sorry. And now I want to turn it over to you to do the talking. So let me know in the chat what waste management actions that you would like to see be implemented in the Sustainable CT Action Roadmap. It can be something you feel like we're lacking right now, something your community is already doing, or something that you feel passionately about. Just feel free to post that in the chat, and I'll take note of each response and bring your suggestions to my colleagues as well. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing now, that's totally fine. Or if you think of something in the future, just feel free to email actioninput@sustainablecct.org or info@sustainablecct.org. Either works with your ideas. We are always revising our actions and adding new actions based on what folks want to see in our program. And the next slide, please. So that's it. Thank you so much, so much for having me today and for allowing me to share some of the amazing work that's happening in communities across the state. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you, Lisa. That was tremendous. There are several responses in the chat to the towns that are participating, and some of the attendees didn't know, so maybe you can answer their questions about whether your town is participating or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are going to move on to a Q&A for both Mayor Ben and yourself in a second. I would just like to remind everyone that we have another session next Thursday. It has to do with home audits. It's going to be run by Michelle Ekman. And there is a little homework to do. So if you go to their website, you can register there for the session, and you can also get your instructions. So please join us next Thursday for a program on waste audits. Jen, Q&A time.
All right, so we have a couple of questions for you first, Mayor Ben. First, two different questions asking sort of the same thing, which is that a lot of municipalities do not yet have a recycling coordinator. and are expecting it to be a volunteer position. And I'm interpreting their questions to say, what can other municipalities do to help create similar positions?
It's a great question, and I think that the answer is really in the evidence here. You can see that several of the questions that were addressed to me in the chat have already been answered by our recycling coordinator, and the fact that we're all here tonight really has a lot to do with the fact that we've had a really strong working relationship with the Rockwell Foundation because of our professionally staffed recycling department, recycling office. And so what I would say is that residents should make the case to their town council, to their board of selectmen, that this is a worthwhile investment. And then when it comes to city and public services, you get what you pay for. And if you are willing to make the investment to bring in professional staffing for recycling and sustainability initiatives, you are going to start to see results very quickly, results which in many cases are going to save the municipality money. And so I think that the results really speak for themselves. I think that you can point to places like Middletown and the handful of other towns that do have full-time sustainability coordinators and recycling coordinators. And you can point to things like that silver rating that we have for sustainable CT. You can point to some of the programs that I listed on this presentation, which I'm happy to share, and say these are the types of things that can really only be made possible with professional staffing. And use your volunteer recycling coordinators and your recycling coalitions and committees and what have you to help you make that case, because I'm 99% sure that they will strongly agree that this is something that requires professional staffing, it requires full-time staffing, and that the results are gonna come from that. And the other thing that I would say is that as we are talking about this from a statewide perspective, to try to make that case at the statewide level as well, so that there is, there's less of a financial excuse for your municipality to make if there is a grant available through the state to get a recycling coordinator off the ground in the first few years. Even on a part-time basis, you're going to start seeing a difference. That will mean that municipalities have an opportunity to apply for that and get some funding and start to see the results quickly. And that's what's going to help us scale it up around the rest of the state.
Thank you, Mayor Ben. A question that probably is more for Kim O'Rourke or Krishna Winston, who I know are both here, but wanting to know if people want to volunteer at things like the Swap Shack, how can they get involved? Mayor Ben, if you know the answer, you're welcome to say. Otherwise, we can unmute Kim or Krishna.
The answer is talk to Kim.
All right. Go ahead, Kim.
Oh, hi, everybody. Yeah, definitely. Actually, I responded privately to that person who asked, but please give me a call or send me an email if anybody is interested. We absolutely would love to have your help on any of our projects. And I'll put my email and phone number in the chat. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we have a long question from Galen asking about thoughts on directing resources toward changing the behavior of corporations who are creating and encouraging the consumption of huge quantities of difficult to recycle single-use products. So why should the individuals be responsible? Wouldn't it make more sense for that to be at the root of the problem? So I think this is addressing some of what Commissioner Dykes had talked about with extended producer responsibility, but either Lisa or Ben, any responses to that?
I would agree with the sentiments behind that question, and really the Break Free from Plastics Pollution Act that I talked a little bit about is the big proposal that I'm aware of at the federal level to try to do that, to try to shift the requirement onto the producers, onto the companies, the corporations, to use sustainable materials or to be penalized, and to not rely. You're right. I mean, consumer behavior can drive a lot of change, but only up to a point. especially if it's kind of a moving target sometimes, which this topic has been, because we're learning new things year after year after year, and the circumstances are changing year after year after year. So I totally agree with the sentiment, and that's why I think there needs to be robust action. We're talking as municipalities. It's common that we talk about needing action from the state to help us with something, but as a state, we need action at the national level. And as we look towards potential climate action and potential other related action from the Biden administration, that should be a point of advocacy for groups like this one, I think.
Anything you want to add, Lisa?
No, that was a great answer. Thank you.
And a question for you, Lisa. Are municipalities eligible to participate in the community match fund only if they've signed up and/or are certified with Sustainable CT, or can that be a before or after process?
Yeah. So all that we require for your participation in the community match fund is that you're a registered community. So you do not have to be certified with Sustainable CT. And all that you need to do to be registered is pass a resolution in your municipality. And then you're a registered community. So after that process, you'd be able to apply for a community match fund project.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any final questions for either Mayor Ben or Lisa?
Well, again, thank you very much. Thank you to our three presenters, Commissioner Dykes, Mayor Ben, and Lisa. Thank you so much. Did a great job. The Rockfall Foundation really appreciates it. In the chat is a link to register for our remaining events. So please register for the 4 that we have left. And I look forward to seeing you. Again, have a good evening.